various different people today about campaign finance reform, but I think we need to set a little bit of a context. Why do we keep talking about campaign finance reform? Can I hear from people in the audience? Why do you think it's important? We don't have campaign finance reform, but why do we need it? What are we trying to achieve with it? I think we need to think back in terms of our ideals, because there are two things that we're really trying to achieve with campaign finance reform. The first is a clear idea of the ideals that we have as Americans about what our elections should be about. What are some of the qualities that we're looking for in our elections? Things that we feel we don't have right now. Say that again? A level playing field, which means that we're looking to encourage more people to run, right? And we hear from the governor about that. We're looking to encourage a multiplicity of candidates, a lot of different views. What else are we lacking?
Responsiveness to the people.
Right, responsiveness to the people, which is an opportunity for voters and our residents to hear a multiplicity of solutions to the problem. So a vigorous marketplace of ideas where candidates can get their word out effectively and where voters and others can hear what solutions candidates have, because we think it has an effect on what? Why do people run? It has an effect on what? On service, on public service, on public policy. We want good public policies, not influenced by what? Money. Campaign dollars, which candidates need to run for office, and we're talking about a vicious cycle. Things which happen over and over again. People with good ideas are discouraged from running because they don't have enough money. People who have good ideas get into office, and what do they need to run again? Money. And here in New York, we contribute to that with what you see up here on the first slide, which are sky-high campaign limits. The idea that you can contribute, any wealthy individual, close to $95,000 to any political party. And that's any political party. So you can give $94,200 to the Democratic Party, and then you can turn around and give $94,200 to the Republican Party, or the Working Families Party, or the Independence Party. The limit for statewide candidates, just under $40,000. Really unusually high. And then I think you need to look at the top and the bottom to understand the real problems with our campaign finance law as it exists. Because the bottom is no limits on donations to housekeeping accounts, which are the accounts which the leadership in the legislature uses to enforce their power. So we've got an unusual situation here. Next slide, please. Highest limits to statewide candidates of any state. And we have a comparison. It's not just other states, it's the federal limits as well. We see a campaign system that has a more intelligent set of limits. In New York, the problem persists higher than the national average, and again, unlimited soft money to party committees. And why is that a problem? Because it's a huge loophole around even the very high limits which we currently have. Next slide. So this is just a graphic presentation that shows you where we sit comparative to other states. And you can see that New York's parties and New York's statewide contribution limits are higher than anybody else. Either the federal, the New York State, New York Assembly, and the federal candidates, we're at the top. And as Blair said, that's not a good place to be. Next slide. Again, huge amounts of money pouring in. Very, very high amounts, over $110 million from December 2006 through November 2008, and we are on track to set even higher records this year. And again, the breakdown, legislative committees raising $41.5 million, candidates raising nearly $70 million. Next slide. And what we see is this is not about ideology. This is not about an allegiance to a particular point of view or a particular public policy, because what we see is the money follows what? Power. Power. Exactly right. The money follows power. And when the power shifts, the money shifts. So in 2007, 2008, where the assembly, as now, is controlled by a Democratic majority, the ratio is just extraordinary. Over 16 million raised by Democratic candidates, over only just under 6 million raised by GOP candidates. And you see the same thing, not as severe in the Senate, but where during that election cycle, the GOP was in power, the Republicans were in power, they had the fundraising advantage over the Democrats. But there, it's much more evenly split because your power is beginning to converge. Next slide. Okay? And again, same story. Where you've got a legislative majority, the money is going to follow you. Next slide. It's interesting to see who is contributing to our elections, because the pattern is pretty well set forth. We have business interests who are by far and away the leaders in campaign contributions. Individuals coming second, and then the two entries which are italicized, because again, this is where you get your loopholes: transfers from political parties and transfers from other candidates. Is it clear to everybody why? I think it would be clear why the parties want to transfer. They want to maintain their party, but why would candidates transfer between themselves? Any ideas? It's a way to consolidate power. That's how you build a leadership position. Next slide. Okay? Here we show, again, not ideologically driven. This is about power and access to power. Next slide. Incumbents have an advantage. Nothing new here. It is a problem that we need to address. It's one of the things which, as the governor points out, discourages ordinary citizens from running for office. Next slide. And again, the way in which the leadership in the legislature consolidates its power and makes sure that there is not dissent and that our individual representatives in some houses don't have a lot to do is the use of campaign fundraising. Next slide. This is interesting, not only for the amount of money, but when you look at the industries which are the leaders in campaign contributions to the Democrats. Take a look at which industries: insurance, financial banking, real estate and construction, legal lobbying, and then health and mental hygiene. Next slide, please. Top donor to the Republicans. See any familiar industries? They're virtually the same. They changed their order, but again, this is about buying access to power and influencing public policies, not to ensure that the policies benefit a maximum number of New Yorkers, but for special interest purpose. Next slide. And a very important fact about our current campaign finance system: very few individual New Yorkers contribute. There are a lot of reasons. When you see those high limits, when you see the amount of money that pours into the system, you have a campaign finance system currently which discourages individual participation. Next slide. And what we see is increasing amounts of money that come from the largest donors. Is that the campaign system that we want? Is that what we want to encourage in our elections? There are solutions. You've heard some of them today. And hopefully you will stay engaged with the process while we try and make our elections live up to our ideals. Our campaign finance system right now is an impediment to that, and we have to change it. Thanks.
Here's a